Well, hello, Blazer fans. Welcome to our most recent edition of the Blazers Edge Videocast. I am Sam Tung, along with editor of the site, Dave Decker. Dave, how are you doing here after a pretty fantastic week last week of Trailblazer basketball?
Yeah, absolutely. That week was better than could have been expected. It was fantastic. The energy finally returned to the Moda Center with victories against Indiana and Oklahoma City. The vibe was there as if this were classic Blazer time, and that, even with the winning, that had kind of been missing so far this year. So those were great, energetic wins. A loss to Dallas, you can't fault the Blazers for that too much. They're going to lose some. They had some defensive problems in that game that kind of got exposed throughout. Hey, you win some, you lose some. You still got to be riding high as a Blazer fan this week.
Well, one thing, speaking of kind of this high that everyone has been on, it was kind of a low a couple nights ago against Utah. I was telling you, I look a little tired today, and the reason I look a little tired, it's kind of a two-part thing. The first part is I just recently, about 3 months ago, moved from Portland, where I born and raised in Mount Tabor and Woodstock. So if you're wondering where I'm originally from, according to your blog post, that's where I'm originally from. But I most recently moved to South Bend, Indiana, home of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And so if there's anyone out there interested in watching a Blazer game, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter, @SamTung. But it was funny because we're 3 hours ahead of the Trailblazers in the time zone. And I thought, okay, I can watch the first half. I'll watch the second half on replay a little later. It's not going to be too difficult. Well, little did I know I was going to be up till almost midnight watching the Trailblazers try to squeeze out a win against Utah. Dave, a team that they beat by 30-plus points just a week ago. And after that great week they had last week, certainly not what you're expecting to see from the Trailblazers.
Well, you know, you got to let some of these games go. Not every elite level team, even teams that are acknowledged at the elite level, will play with the same intensity every night. After going up 42 on Utah in the first game, you could kind of forgive the Blazers a little bit for taking it easy during the first half of the return match. It was one of those halves where everything was slow. The guards weren't really paying that much attention. They hung Robin Lopez out to dry. I've actually become a little bit protective of Lopez on defense now. I mean, you know what he can't do. You know his weaknesses. He's not real mobile. His teammates know that too. It makes me angry when they just let guys go in the lane there and expect him to rotate. They're just asking for either, you know, foul trouble or a dunk. So they didn't do a great job covering for their buddy who's done so much for them so far this year. And you know, it was just a sloppy first half. That said, they came through in the third quarter. They played one really great quarter of basketball. That was enough to take down the Jazz because the Jazz are awful. They should be an Eastern Conference team this year. And, you know, it was enough. It was a win. That's all that really matters. I don't think this is indicative of a season-long pattern. You're just going to have some games like this. The Blazers will obviously lose some games. That's the way it goes. You just kind of let that go and just hang on to the Indiana-Oklahoma City thing. Before you cut back in here, though, I got to ask, whereabouts in the Mount Tabor area did you live? What streets?
So I grew up on 54th between Hawthorne and Lincoln, and then recently moved to about 55th and Woodstock. So southeast, tried and true.
I grew up on 57th and right off Hawthorne. So we were like 3 blocks from each other.
I know, that's crazy.
The nation, and yeah, we were. Of course, you were a little later than I was, probably. I mean, I'm 29, and you've got to be in your early to mid 20s, right? So, you know,
Exactly.
we probably weren't neighbors at the hood, but I used to play basketball over at the Western Baptist Seminary hoop over there, and head up to Mount Tabor to run, and so yeah, we're practically neighbors. Who knew?
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, we did all the same stuff, so that's pretty sweet. It was, and I have to say, Dave, too, it was really cool. I know a lot of commenters were talking about it. It was really cool to see not only how many people were from different areas of Portland, but I mean, all over the world. There were people from Asia and from Europe and from Australia, and it was pretty fantastic to see.
It's weird. You know, Blazers Edge has an international and across the nation reach now. I mean, who would have envisioned this 8 years ago? But it's really funny because I have a hard time going many places if I wear a Blazers Edge T-shirt, or sometimes I even get recognized from video things like this. Inevitably, someone will stop me on the street and say, "Hey, are you, Dave?" and blah blah blah, and it's really neat, and it still surprises me to this day. But yeah, we've got a really large readership across the world, and shout out to all our international readers watching this in other time zones. We love you guys, and it's part of what gives the site its flavor and that weird kind of chemistry that makes it great. So hey, thanks for watching.
And want to shift gears back to the Trailblazers, Dave. One question that we actually had from Paul, and this is, again, in large part, these videocasts are talking about everything that's going on around Blazerland, but we also want to cover all of your questions. So send those mailbags to blazersub@gmail.com. That's blazersub@gmail.com. That's where Paul sent his email asking about LaMarcus Aldridge and his potential MVP candidacy. Paul asked, LaMarcus Aldridge has already been the player of the week twice. Dave, if he keeps it up, how serious of an MVP candidate is he?
Well, I mean, pretty serious the way that next group below LeBron James is serious. I mean, you got LeBron James, you got Kevin Durant kind of edging in there depending on how the Thunder do. And then there's everybody else. And it's not because their teams are necessarily better, although obviously they have been in recent years, but those players are so transcendent every night that there's no comparing. However, LaMarcus Aldridge, Paul George, that kind of player who is steady, productive, and loading his team on his back every night, they kind of changed the definition of the word valuable from just statistically valuable to valuable to their team, valuable to X number of wins in a season. And I think you have to give some credit to that kind of value. My argument is, right now, wherever you put George, you have to also put Aldridge, because they're basically doing the same thing in different ways in different conferences. Neither one of their teams would be succeeding without them, and their teams are succeeding beyond anybody's expectations. So you got to count Paul George in that conversation, and you've got to count LaMarcus Aldridge in that conversation. I don't think he'll win it, but I think he needs to be mentioned, especially if his play keeps up this way.
I have a couple of statistics for you, Dave. It's funny you mentioned those four players, because it's pretty obvious that those are the four players that are kind of in this elite category right now. I think a lot of people might put Chris Paul in that category as well, although the Clippers have sort of struggled by most people's expectations. But here are some statistics to look at or think about when you're talking about this conversation. First, starting with Aldridge, 23 and 10. He's shooting 48% from the field. I think another thing we have to mention, over a steal a game, a guy that is, you talked about how Lopez is immobile, a guy that's sometimes had to be that weak side defender. The other people that you mentioned, let's kind of work our way up, starting with Paul George, 25 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists, and arguably, I mean, him and Roy Hibbert could be the two best defensive players in the NBA this year, and they're both on the same team. He's been incredible to start the year, especially on the defensive side. Next guy on the list seems to be Kevin Durant, 29 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists a game, which is pretty amazing, and shooting 47% from the field, which, if history is any indication, that's probably going to loom around that 50% mark by the end of the year. But then you mentioned LeBron James. This is what's incredible. He's averaging 25 points a game, 6 assists, 6 rebounds. So each one of those guys has a higher number in one of the categories. However, he's shooting 44% from beyond the arc and a crazy 59% from the field, Dave. He's taking 15 shots a game and averaging 25 points. By comparison, Aldridge shooting 20 shots a game. It's unbelievable this guy can average 25 points a night and still only shoot 15 shots. He gets to the line. He's and also, again, an elite defender. So I at least wanted to add those statistics in there rather than just talking about the eye test. But the eye test really serves that LeBron is the best guy. But even statistically, it's pretty amazing how efficient has been to start the year.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the way I compare it is LeBron is like Mother Teresa, okay?
Oh boy.
LaMarcus and all the rest of them are like your mom or your sister or your wife. They're all great people, and in your life, they're number one. But everybody has to point at Mother Teresa and say, that lady's got something that nobody else has. And that's kind of the way LeBron is in this league right now. And you almost start the conversation, there's LeBron, but to make it fair to everybody, we're going to put him in his own category and talk about everybody else. So, MVP at the end of the season, who knows what'll happen, but, it's always him. And then LaMarcus should be happy, I think, to be seriously mentioned in the level right below LeBron James.
The first ever LeBron James Mother Teresa comparison, Dave. I don't know if I've ever heard that one before, but I do. I like it. I definitely like it.
Yeah,
I can already see the commenters enjoying it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I can check off Mother Teresa now. Now I just got to get in Dunkin' Donuts, some kind of aspen tree, and a big wheel. So we'll get those in by the end of the video.
Okay, perfect. Want to change the topic a little bit here, Dave, to a little trade talk. I know a lot of people enjoy talking trades, and one question, really one guy that was brought up this week was Omer Asik, the guy that Mark Stein said that the Blazers had no interest in a couple of days ago. However, that's kind of been the name that's been floating around the league. Now, post Rudy Gay moving to Sacramento, we now know that Asik is probably the next available guy. So that being said, Eric asking a multiple-part question about Omer Asik. So we'll try to get through as many of these as we can. A, what's the likelihood of the Blazers landing him? And B, what would his likely importance be on the team? We're going to mention another guy that might be a potential guy that we might hear more rumors about. But just your thoughts on Asik now that we kind of have a little bit more news and that Rudy Gay has been moved.
Well, if his price goes down, I can't imagine the Blazers not being interested. Rumor has it that Houston is looking for a couple of first-round picks and or good players and what have you. The Blazers just don't have that to offer. I mean, they have a first-round pick somewhere in the future. Presumably, with their record right now, they're anticipating that won't be a very high pick. So, the Blazers might be willing to part with that, but I'm not sure Houston would consider that fair trade in return. Houston has to come a little bit down on the price before they get to Portland's budget level. My stance on this hasn't changed. If you can do it without touching the starting lineup, you do so, and you don't blink because they need more depth at center. Sometimes people object to us talking about trades when the team is 17-4. This team will need more to make it through the rest of the race. I mean, they're doing really well, but every cylinder is clicking, pretty much optimally, not on every given night, but overall. And they're thin in a couple of places, one of which is center. So don't object to your team going out to get some help to bolster this start. That's actually good discussion. That's a good thought. I just don't think the Blazers will be able to afford Omer Asik. The issue of what he would do, I don't think you worry about that. I think, competition for the starting role is healthy. I think there's room enough for both Asik and Lopez on this team. I think they both play, as we said last time we did this, the same kind of center, so it'd be a smooth transition in. And I think that Asik would be playing for enough of a winner and have enough of a role that you would worry about that when the time comes. If you can get him without touching your starting lineup, I think you go for that.
And it's another something that we're certainly going to see more, Dave, is Asik's trade value could be diminishing as we go through the coming weeks. A guy that had to be asked out of a game, that really his interest in playing right now for Houston. There's surely a lot of people around the league that are pretty skeptical about that, and his value could be decreasing to the point where a team like Portland could step in. They're probably going to need a third team in order to make something like that happen if Houston does want draft picks. Because Portland, obviously doesn't have one as it's due to Charlotte, unless the wheels completely fall off in the next couple of weeks. But I do think that's something to keep an eye on is what is it going to take today versus what is it going to take in 2 or 3 weeks. I think that it could be a completely different conversation between now and then.
Well, and absolutely. And people are talking about, well, what's his attitude like? Because he's obviously a little bit in the doghouse in Houston, and he's put himself there with his attitude and reluctance to play. Now, granted, and that's never a good thing. However, Houston did kind of work him over a little bit. I mean, they brought him in as a starting center. He did really well for them. I mean, he made his name in Houston, not in Chicago. He gave them most everything they could have hoped for, became one of the best defensive centers in the NBA, and then one season later they brought in a prettier girl to supplant him. That's going to make anybody upset. He may not be handling this the right way, but these guys are human beings too, and if you change the circumstances around him, you will probably get a little bit different level of effort. In fact, certainly you will, than you're seeing right now.
Another question about a big man, this one coming from Alex, asking, what do you think of Spencer Hawes? 3-point shooting, pretty good passer, and a decent shot blocker. If he could be our backup center, I think it would be great. Philly is tanking, so why keep him around? Would he fit well? How would the trade work? Your thoughts on Spencer Hawes?
He's a player that I have not liked very much as a center. I mean, he does a few things well, which Alex, I think it was, mentioned. Those are a given, but I don't like his fit if you rely on him as an NBA center. It's just his production skyrockets sometimes, other times he's not as effective, but mostly you have defensive issues, and he's not really the kind of guy who can grab a game by the throat and change it. However, once again, you're faced with the question, what kind of center does Portland need? We talked about this on the blog today. I credited Mo Williams with a fairly decent impact despite a 4 of 12 shooting night last night. And somebody wrote and said, well, Williams kind of stunk. It was 4 of 12. His defense wasn't good. That's correct, except that happened to be exactly the 4 of 12 that the Blazers needed because Mo just came in, did his thing, and shot him out of a slump a little bit. Spencer Hawes, is he that same kind of guy? Even with all his weaknesses, could he come in off the bench, spread the floor, provide more of an offensive option at center, grab a few rebounds? Your defense is going to be questionable, but maybe your bench defense is a little questionable anyway. Maybe Spencer Hawes would also make a better fit with, say, a Thomas Robinson off the bench than Joe Freeland does or Robin Lopez does. So there are possibilities that for Portland he might work in better than his individual production and his individual skills indicate. Now, the question, as you said, is how much will it cost to get him? The good news there, that should be much, much less than an Ashik or any other starting level center. The Blazers might be just able to trade a couple of promising young guys for Hawes. Philly is probably going to lose him anyway, and so they'll not be interested in retaining him. He's not the type, as I said, to build around. So, hey, if you can get him cheap, that might be a great stopgap to carry you through the rest of the year.
Next topic here on the Videocast, Dave. Again, great questions, both from Eric and Alex there. And wanted to have one more question, and this is actually an X's and O's question, Dave, from Andy. And Andy asks, I'm Dame's biggest fan, so don't get me wrong, but is it fair to start asking why he seems to have trouble finishing at the rim? Dave?
Okay, well, I should preface this by saying I haven't checked the stats on this recently, so I don't know if he's trending upward or downward. But I do know that one thing that you've got to factor in there is his free throws have been increasing, and his free throw accuracy is deadly. So, along with that concept of having trouble finishing at the rim, you have to look at that free throw line and say he's actually being pretty effective, I think, going inside. Damian has never been the world's best finisher at the cup. His favorite shot, his comfort zone, is that three-pointer or the jumper pull-up off the dribble. This year he's gotten better at going all the way to the rim. He tends to get checked a little bit. he pulls out 1 or 2 shots every game, I think, that look like wizardry, just snakes his way to layup. But on average, he looks more like a superstar when he's shooting the jumper than when he's putting the ball on the floor. So that's just part of his makeup, I think. That's part of what makes him who he is. The neat thing is, this offense is designed to where he has enough help to where he can be mostly a jump shooter, rely on his comfort zone, and then pepper that in occasionally with the dribble drive. That hasn't been hurting the Blazers, that he's been having trouble finishing in the rim in certain games. In fact, mostly what he's done is say, well, I'm going to collect my free throws, and then I'm going to pass the ball, and look, Wesley Matthews just scored 20, we win. Where it's going to cause problems is when the Blazers get down, their backs are against the wall, everybody's thinking they've got to win the game themselves, and all of a sudden Damian puts his head down and bulls his way in there, and there, I think, unless he gets bailed out with the foul shot, then you're going to see some issues. Then that will break down Portland's offense. But that hasn't happened yet, and we don't know that it's going to happen. We just have to take the good with the bad with Lillard right now and credit him for having good timing, credit him for having a good jumper, and say whatever shortcomings he's had haven't ended up hurting the team much.
Looking ahead, Dave, into the next, really the next couple of days, Portland currently sitting at 18-4 overall. That still tops in the conference. So a big game coming up, a rubber match game, I should say, against a chance to get a little revenge against Houston here coming up on Thursday at home. That's a national TV game, so people on the West Coast probably won't be watching too much of it, but a lot of those, or excuse me, on the East Coast, but a lot of those West Coast people, this might be one of their, second or third chances to watch the Trailblazers on national television against a fairly reputable opponent. So your thoughts on the Trailblazers, still 14 games over 500, looking for a win against Houston?
Well, the big problem here is that the Blazers' interior defense obviously gets exposed, and the rebounding is threatened by Dwight Howard. I don't know if you've noticed, but over the last couple of weeks there have been some games in which the opponent has really taken over control of the glass, and as soon as that happens, the Blazers suffer badly. I mean, this is where the opponent goes on huge runs, the Blazers have trouble scoring, because some of their only interior offense is off the glass, off the offensive rebound, and the Blazers tend to prosper when their tempo is quicker than the opponents, when they get down the floor fast but make the opponents walk it up in the half court into a set defense. If you don't control the glass, you don't get either of those things. So that's the first thing you have to watch out for. What is Howard doing to Portland's defense and rebounding? Even if he's not scoring 30 points, is he creating so much trouble and drawing so much attention that the Blazers just can't follow through with the rest of their game? The other one, of course, that killed the Blazers last time was James Harden. Again, Wesley Matthews up and down as a defender, kind of like Lopez. Better in some ways as a team defender than as an individual defender, kind of like Lopez. Harden doesn't let you get away with that. He's going to take it right at you. If he smells weakness, he's going to shoot 42 shots, and the Rockets are going to let him. So you have to look at, is Matthews guarding Harden? Is Batum guarding Harden? At what point do they switch that up? At what point do they try to double team? If they do try to double team, then what are they letting loose? And can Houston follow through, either hitting the three or working the ball around to Howard on the inside, who would then be against single coverage and would presumably have an easy time scoring? It's all about the defense in this game. I think Portland can work their way around Houston's defense, but can the Blazers themselves defend the Rockets and keep them and their two stars from just punching a hole right in everything the Blazers want to do and walking away with the game?
Well, it's certainly, and now you talk a lot about, Dave, about how the Trailblazer defense is going to be a huge key to the game. To me, on the other side, that Houston defense is also a big key to the game. Trailblazers right now, arguably the best offensive team in the league, or one of the best offensive teams in the league. Dwight Howard, while being a good rebounder, a shot blocker, certainly isn't the same dominant big man. I think we had the same conversation a couple weeks ago. So to me, that has to be another another part to this conversation is, you know, on one side, can Matthews guard James Harden? But quite frankly, on the other side, with the kind of tear that Wes Matthews has been on, and the kind of lack of defense that we've seen from James Harden in the last couple of years, can James Harden cover Wes Matthews? I mean, I think it's not obviously not the same type of conversation. I'm not comparing the two in terms of offensive capability, but you do have to think a little bit that, you know, there's a lot of defensive deficiencies on Houston that Portland has plenty of opportunities to take advantage of.
True enough, and you have to watch. Because when the Blazers are prospering, Matthews is getting a lot of those weak side threes. You don't have to send your off guard to stop him out there. If you can get any player out there to get a hand in his face, that takes the percentages down. But if Houston can't do that, for instance, I mean, the analogy on the other side is if Houston has to spend so much effort guarding Aldridge that they're going to leave a weak side guy free for the shot, well, then the Blazers can certainly make them pay, because I don't think that they're quick enough or committed enough to be able to take care of Portland's offense in that way. However, if you want me to put odds on it, I not only put odds on Houston having learned that a little better now that we're a month or two into the season than most of Portland's opponents. I mean, they have to be circling that in red ink in their game plan. But also saying that, you know, as you say, if Matthews goes off and has a great game, that's probably 22 points. If Harden goes off, that can be 50. So you're right, they both count, but the onus, I think, is on the Blazers to defend Houston in order to make their offensive game tell, rather than the other way around. And this is what they didn't really solve last time. We'll see if they can do it. It's a great test for the Blazers because Houston pushes all of their buttons. It's like having to work with that person who annoys you most in the office. Anybody can work with your best friend, but that guy, can you make money with that guy you hate? If you can, nobody's going to stop you. And this is the way the Blazers are with Houston. Not that it all rides on one game, but you've got to show that you can win this kind of game against this kind of opponent if you want to be taken seriously.
Well, the Blazers have that chance on Thursday, again, 10:30 tip. We want to thank everyone for sending their emails in today. If you want to send one in for Dave to either answer potentially in one of his written versions of the mailbag, or to do it in the video version, send those to blazersub@gmail.com. That's blazersub@gmail.com. Thank you, Dave, for your time here on the Blazers Edge Videocast. We will be back soon. Again, Blazers, Houston, 10:30 on national television. That's going to be on TNT. Check out everything leading up to it on blazersedge.com. For Dave Deckard, I am Sam Tung. We will see you all soon.